Hi everybody, welcome to our third episode of Talking Automotive with Mark and John. My name is John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Palavestra. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi John, great to be on our third show, and today I'm really excited about our first guest speaker. We've got Karl Winther. He is a marketing guru with a successful background at Myer, at Officeworks, and also Australia Post. And he has some amazing insights that really opened my eyes today in the discussion.
Yeah, Mark, I'm really excited about this. I really enjoyed the discussion today. Karl came out with some really brilliant stuff in that. I think the thing what he brings across so strongly is how to really be inspired in very tough, difficult conditions and where to find the gems out there and what to focus on.
Yes, John, the 3 points for me were the investment spend, don't go dark, pivoting with paid, earned and owned assets. And the third one is that local area connection and customer centricity. Let's hear what he's got to say.
Karl, welcome and thank you for joining us on our show. Good morning.
Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it. And good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning, Karl. Really good to have you join us as a marketing guru, a man who's had a lot of success in some significant businesses, I might add. You crafted your art at Myer when Myer was a retail juggernaut. And also your massive successes at Officeworks, and we see the fruits of your labours that they're yielding right now or reaping, and also your time at Australia Post. So an operative in the marketing space that really knows his stuff, and we really are pleased and honoured to have you on our show.
Well, it's great to be talking all things marketing, but also great to be talking about the automotive industry as well. And I should probably address the elephant in the room. I'm not an auto guy. But don't hold that against me. But I am a marketing guy, so I'm not going to be talking about things that I don't know, but I think you're very kind there, Mark, calling me a marketing guru, but I am very passionate about the vocation of marketing and the discipline of marketing. And I think from a marketing perspective, regardless of the industry, there are certain principles that are true. What may change are some of the tactical executions, but the principles are true. And that's what I hope to sort of share with you guys today and your wider listening audience in the automotive industry, especially as we are, undertaking this COVID-19 period where we've been all disrupted massively. So great to be with you guys.
Now, John, lockdowns are slowly lifting around Australia, and people are really keen to get out, and the tension's building to get out of isolation and back to mobility. So the mobility is returning. And it's interesting, I know there's been some comments around this, is that Winston Churchill once said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So, Karl, I'm definitely keen to get your insights as to how we can really take advantage of this crisis and not let it go to waste.
Yeah, looking forward to sharing some of my thoughts.
Yeah, Mark, there's been pretty huge changes in the industry here. I think things are pretty tight at the moment, and things are definitely not the same playing field as normal. So, Karl, what's your view in terms of marketing investment during COVID-19? What do you see the state of play at the moment?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. And I've been doing a lot of research in that. Before I go into that, if you're watching on the video, I should explain why I've got a Renault helmet. It's actually Damon Hill's replica helmet. It was my go-kart helmet. So even though I'm not an automotive guy, I am an automotive enthusiast. And that goes back to my go-karting days when I was much younger than I am now. So I'll just explain that one. But thanks to the question, John. It's something I'm really, really passionate about. I mean, doing a lot of reading and I like to share some of the thoughts and some of the best practices. To give you a bit of a background, as Mark said, I've been the head of marketing at Myer when they were flying, GM of marketing at Officeworks, and the chief marketing officer at Australia Post. But before that, I was actually a history student. My university background was actually in history. And I think that's very relevant to marketing or any practice of business, because I love to learn from the past to then interpret the future. And I've been looking at a lot of the past data in terms of as we've been in recessions, depressions, and what marketers have done and what marketers have learned. And the biggest thing that marketers have learned over those times, and looking at all the different case studies, as hard as it is to swallow, is to invest for the long term, not invest for the short term, but invest for the long term. Investment may mean to actually just hold the line in terms of, you know, not letting what I'm going to call, to use the analogy, a marketing fire go out. And I'll explain why in terms of some of the principles if you're interested. But what we see is for any company that continues to invest right now, they don't reap the rewards now because the economy is depressed or in recession and there's not a lot of demand. But what you actually, you reap the benefits of are in 1, 2, even 5 years' time.
So, Karl, question for me.
Yeah.
Many dealers have gone into, like, we're looking dealer specific now. So many dealers and even manufacturers have gone into hibernation for the lockdown period, and many have reduced staff and suspended their marketing actions.
Yeah.
Now, I'm keen to get your thoughts as to what are the costs of going into hibernation, and what do you see as being the best practice in this time whilst revenue is significantly impacted?
Yeah, I think it's important that we acknowledge that revenue has been significantly impacted and people's jobs and livelihoods have been affected. As I was saying, that in terms of, you know, it's key to invest for the long term. So in terms of some of the best practice, some of the data I looked at was actually going back to the depression of the 1920s, the oil crisis during the 70s, the recession of the 90s, and the GFC of 2008. And what they actually found was that any companies that actually maintained a level of marketing or a level of marketing investment relative to the competitors, what happened is their share of voice. So share of voice means your share of marketing spend or your share of advertising relative to the competitive set. That was either maintained or actually went up. And that's an important thing to understand, because in marketing, there's this principle called share of voice equals share of market. There is a proven correlation to how much share of voice you have to how much share of market you will then have in the future. So when you think about it, it's actually quite a simple point of view, in that, you know, the more people know about you and the more presence you have, the more share of market you will have in the future. So it's almost like the company with the biggest budgets win. And we've actually seen companies in the past, like, for example, and I won't talk specifically about automotive because hopefully some of the inspiration I can give is outside the industry that then the automotive industry can then take heed of. But like Kellogg's have been known to actually invest during the 1970 oil crisis. They invested more in marketing. And what that happened is their market share went up significantly into the late 70s and early 80s. There were companies during the Depression that actually increased their advertising investment in the 1920s Depression, increased their advertising investment. And then 5 years later, their sales significance were actually 30% higher than companies that had not invested. That cycle has repeated itself during the 1990s recession, where in Australia, companies that invested in marketing versus companies that cut marketing, there was a 40% differential in their sales in 5 years' time. And the last one during the GFC actually showed in England, looking at multiple case studies, that after 5 years' time, there was almost a $4 million profit differential between companies that invested in marketing versus companies that didn't invest in marketing. Now, the short-term view is we need to protect cash flow. We need to, there isn't a lot of demand, so we actually let the marketing flame go out. But what you actually find is it's harder to reignite that flame once the market starts rebounding and booming. And I probably want to explain why that occurs. So I've explained that the idea of share of voice and share of market. So it's a pretty simple concept that if you have a higher share of voice, your share of market goes up. But what actually happens during a recession is, as you said, Mark, a lot of industries and a lot of companies actually start decreasing their marketing expenditure. So if you can just hold the line, your share of voice actually goes up. If your share of voice goes up, your share of market goes up. Let's just take a simple example. If my marketing expenditure was X dollars and everyone around me cuts their marketing budget by 50%, if that X dollars equated to 10% share of voice and everyone cuts by 50%, my marketing share of voice now goes up to 20% share of voice. So automatically, even though I haven't invested more, I've maintained the same level of spend, my share of voice goes up. And as I said, there's a proven correlation between share of voice and share of market. So with all those other brands decreasing, my share of voice goes up. What also happens in a recession is that a lot of people, especially now during the COVID-19 period, we're in a captive state. A lot of people don't go out as much. You're at home, you're reading newspapers, you're online, you're watching TV. So media consumption actually goes up. So therefore, it's actually a lot more efficient in terms of your media investment in certain channels. What we also find is that the demand goes down. So not only is media consumption going up, but media demand is actually going down. So, for example, I just read that during the COVID-19 period, in the last month, that TV consumption actually went up by 10%, but TV advertising actually went down by 10%. So it really is, if you've got the money to invest, a buyer's market. So media is actually a lot cheaper. And the last sort of reason why this phenomenon occurs, where if you can maintain investment during an economic recession, is there are really two types of advertising. There's, top of funnel and bottom of funnel in terms of what dealers might sort of know. But in marketing terms, we call, emotional brand building and rational sales activation. So think about it in terms of conveying a certain associations around driving performance or fuel efficiency or a family car. That's driving emotional long-term brand building. You can say Volvo with their positioning around safety. That's brand building and building brand equity, building saliency in the mind of the customers. Activation might be more price orientated or more warranty based. It's about something that actually gets someone off their chairs, off their bums, and goes to the dealership there and then because they're actively in market. So what actually happens is in a recession, there's a lot less people actively in market. So what you can do is actually do a lot more effective brand building, building those right associations that you want for your dealer or for your automotive brand that actually then can fuel your growth in 1, 2, and 3 years' time. If I can use an analogy, the best analogy I can think of is the difference between hunting and farming. Now, if I go out hunting, that's a sale right here and right now. I'm shoot to kill, if pardon the pun, and I'm eating right now. If I'm farming, I'm sowing the seeds, and I might enjoy the benefit of those seeds in 6, 12, even 2 years' time. What actually happens in a recession is there are less animals to hunt. There is less things being sold. So therefore, if you try and invest more time and effort into hunting, it's actually a fruitless cause. What you should be spending your time in is in farming, sowing those seeds. So therefore, in 1, 2, and 3 years' time, you've then got a feast in terms of growth in consumption, and that's where a lot of the best practice is actually investing in brand building. I know it seems counterintuitive when cash revenue is down, but investing in brand building for the long term.
Yep. Karl, it's really interesting what you're saying, because I think our first instinct is to cut back, is to get the knife in, cut down, cut expenses, and hold on tight. And I think there are going to be businesses that have to do that because they just don't have the cash flow and they're going to have to do everything to survive. But I think you saying those businesses that do have the money and do have the financial position, they should then keep investing and keep pushing through this period.
Absolutely. But I'm not as blind to think about, when people are losing their jobs and dealerships are under heavy financial crisis, that it's as simple as a market saying continue to invest. What I am saying though is keep the marketing flame alive. Do not let the marketing flame go out. If you've got a fire in front of you, if you let that fire go out, it's a lot harder to reignite. If you can just simmer it down and let it keep burning, it's going to be a lot easier to reignite when, hopefully, after COVID-19, or, we've got to believe that we will bounce back from COVID-19 because it hasn't been a prolonged economic downturn. It's been an instant economic downturn. So hopefully we're going to see a bit more of a V shape, and you need to be best prepared to take advantage of that V shape. Basically, we see that in terms of looking at marketing investment over all the different economic crises we've had over the last 100 years, that the strong get stronger and the weaker get weaker. So how do you try and maintain that level of strength? How do you try and, using that farming analogy, make sure that you're not just hunting for not just the hunting just for what is available, but you're actually building, your silos for the future. And you're right in terms of, some of the data I've been reading is, even though a lot of marketers and a lot of CEOs are aware of this phenomenon, I was reading in the UK that only 7% of all marketers we're actually trying to, maintain investment or increase investment. But some of the smartest marketing companies in the world, Procter & Gamble is one, had said they're coming out and they're going to invest, 20% more in marketing. I just want to address the concept of, if I don't have any funds to invest, that I can't do anything and I'll just sit in my hands. I think that, especially dealer principals should look at this concept called paid, owned and earned media, because if I'm talking about investment, your mind might just go to paid investment, which might be TV advertisements or radio advertisements or newspaper advertisements or social media paid ads or Google search marketing. If I can explain the concept of paid, owned and earned, and I'm sure a lot of your audience will be aware of this, but it's just really important to remind ourselves of this as we're looking to continue to maintain that marketing investment. As I said, paid is all the traditional things that you'd think of from an advertising point of view, but it's really important to look at your owned assets. And what do I mean by owned assets? I mean your website. I mean even your store frontage, your dealership frontage. That could be an example of an owned asset. And then earned assets could be things like how you're trying to generate any form of PR around, your business. In terms of trying to generate reviews, be it for your service offering or for your new car sales. There are certain things around your social media presence in terms of making sure that you're maintaining a level of presence in social media appropriate to the channel. In terms of, LinkedIn versus Twitter versus Instagram. You can invest in those, and, that's a form of investment because it's a form of investment through time and in terms of resource, not just paid advertising. So it's important that even though if you think you don't have any funds to invest in paid advertising, think about how you're going to invest time and resource in those owned and earned assets.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying, because I remember when I first started in automotive, when we went into some tough times in those years, this was 30 years ago, that one of our managing directors used to force us to do even more dealer visits, do more travel time and that. And it's the same with that. Companies cut their advertising, they cut their travel time, they see customers less in that. So these are the opportunities we need to look for. It's sort of the little diamonds. You have to try and find them in the sand to make it work for you.
I think the biggest thing is a belief that we will come out of this. Because, as I said, you look at, the economy over the last 100 years, that yes, there are some massive dips, but overall the trend is up. And we need to prepare for the long term. Yes, you can, fall into the trap of just looking at, this week and this month. Yes, you need to do that. But I'd say that have a vision for the long term, have an eye to the long term, think about what my revenue stream and how I'm building that brand, how I'm building good practices for the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. And if I could sort of give a recommendation to that point, John, it would be around, if you think about your marketing efforts, sort of split it between the here and now and split it between the future. Think about what marketing can I do for 2-3 years time and right now, and what marketing can I do for the today. The today is about, yes, sales are down. I think I heard, Mark, you correct me if I'm wrong, that, for the last month that, new car sales were down about 50%.
Correct. That's correct.
But that still means that there are some sales to be had right now. I mean, let's look at that. So I think, continuing to invest in, there's limited sales, but, in terms of making sure that your bottom of funnel tactics, be it your Google search marketing, your pricing offers, the things that drive short-term activation, you've still got a level of investment there. But in terms of thinking about the long term, it's around, how can I potentially, think about that concept of paid, owned and earned. How could I create potential video content on my own YouTube channel or on my website that could actually attract customers in 1 and 2 years' time? How am I looking at my website and thinking about the customer journey as I enter my website and the web links? If you've ever visited a website and you have those broken journeys where you click on one link and then it gets broken, how can you think about the copy on your website? We've been given this beautiful gift. It's hard to think about a silver lining while we're in the middle of it, but this silver lining of time in the fact that we've got time to reflect on our strategic approaches, time to reflect on some of those practices that we usually can't get to. Another example could be investing for the long term with your sales team. Looking at your sales team and thinking about the sales processes, or that training that, it was always difficult to take your sales team off the floor to give them that level of training. Well, now we've got that perfect opportunity to do that because the demand isn't there. One of the things that you can always look at is your CRM and database, cleaning that up. The amount of times that, you've wanted to look at that and making sure that, there's not multiple people on there, or you're following up and making sure that the details of how you contact people are there. And I think, John, you mentioned about, service calls and things like that. I really think that's a really huge opportunity, because what's really working right now in terms of some of the marketing is this concept of acts and ads. Not just ads where we're saying we're here for you, but really thinking about the customer and demonstrratable acts that actually prove that you're here for the customer. And, I was just thinking about what some things that car dealerships could do as we, empathize what customers are going through right now. It could be that idea that, the car's sitting idle in the driveway. It could be a perfect opportunity to, follow them up for a service call. And I think, Audi have done that. It's a bit of a begrudged purchase, a servicing. But if the car's off the road anyway, and, your car dealership is talking about how we can do this in a contactless way, and actually reframing the situation as saying, well, you're not driving anyway, so you might as well get it serviced. I think that could actually be a positive opportunity that therefore continues that share of voice with the customer. One of the phenomenons I actually heard about through the insurance industry was that car batteries are going dead because cars, again, are sitting idle in the driveways and no one's driving them. Well, imagine a car dealer, sort of made contact with the customer, around this idea and saying, I'm not sure if this is feasible, but, the service department is busy. They could go out and do service calls to recharge the battery or get the battery going or to go do a battery check or, offer free battery checks in some way, shape or form. So this idea of merely being customer centric has got to be key, and not just being a voice, but also demonstrable acts that actually prove a utility and usefulness to their customers, I think is a really important way that you can continue to maintain share of voice and maintain a presence while we're in this economic downturn.
Yeah, I think, Karl, some of the things you're saying there make really good sense, because sometimes, it's a reason to talk to the customer, and even offering a service like if you have a battery run flat, because there may be not that many customers that have that sort of issue, but it is showing you caring, you are part of the community, you will come out and help if necessary. So it's in a way of advertising, because customers will remember that when they come around to buy again, and you would have had that trust. So if you need to talk on various levels and about various factors in it, and I think you make some really good points there. So.
Thanks, John. I think one of the most overused terms that's been used during this COVID-19, besides unprecedented times, has got to be pivot. But what I think you're talking about there, John, is examples of businesses pivoting. No doubt you all had your marketing plans. You had some form of plans going to March and April and June. And Mark started out with a statement from Winston Churchill. I'll go one better and go from a statement from Mike Tyson. That statement from Mike Tyson was, everyone's got a plan until you get in the ring and you get punched in the face. Well, it's fair to say we've all been punched in our face, and all those plans that we had, all those marketing plans we had, we've had to pivot. Pivot doesn't mean you rip them up and you go in a different direction, but pivot actually means you slightly adjust your direction. You maintain your strategy in terms of what you stand for as a brand and your brand personality and the brand equity you built, but you just slightly alter direction. And I think, going out and doing the same things that you were doing over and over again, that could be a sign of insanity, as, the customers are just not there. But, as we've been talking about, John, and some of the examples and what you reminded me of is that the way you could pivot to continue to maintain your presence with your customer, but not just, presence for the sake of it, not just an email saying, hey, we're there, but demonstrating usefulness. What we've actually seen in terms of some of the brands around the world, where they can demonstrate a level of utility, a level of usefulness in a not so typical way, they're actually, positioning themselves well for the future as we come out of, hopefully, an economic downturn sooner rather than later.
Question I'm keen to ask is, you're talking about the storytelling and pivoting. So if you had a marketing plan that was saying, we stand for this, because all brands and dealerships stand for X, and their actions need to flow with that as well, how do they get what medium should they be using to get that message out? Given that, okay, there's constraints, You talked about investment and maintaining that investment for the share of voice and increasing your share of voice.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some really cost-effective ways, given that customers are at home right now and they're consuming electronic media? You know, what are your thoughts on outdoor and radio, which traditionally were in recent times really good avenues to get to people because of all the noise on the electronic channels?
Yeah, I think it's a really as a marketer, one of the biggest questions I get asked is, which medium should I use? And the answer is always 100%, it depends. It depends on the customer you're trying to target. It depends on the message you're trying to convey. And at the moment, it really does depend on the media consumption. So Mark, as you alluded to, that we're quite a captive audience as we talk, you know, in the middle of May. And as I said, TV consumption in terms of TV ratings is actually up 10%. Online news consumption is up significantly. All social media consumption is up. As we're not commuting, radio consumption is actually down. Out of home consumption is actually down. That's not to say that, you know, they're down to levels of zero. But, you know, if you're paying the same rates you were in January and February, that's not representing a great value for money. So, you know, if I was running a dealership or a car brand at the moment, I'd probably be having plans, but with great flexibility in there. So at the moment, if it was the middle of May, you know, I'd be thinking again, unless it depends on the message I've got and the audience I'm trying to reach, if I would be investing in out of home and radio. I'd be looking at, you know, mediums like that are online, because online consumption is massively up. I'd be looking at social media, but also be looking at TV. I think the TV networks are really hurting at the moment in terms of advertising spend. But it flies in the face that actually advertising consumption is significantly up. And it's been proven in terms of going back to that analogy of hunting and farming, and which mediums work better for which messages. It's been proven time and time again that audio visual, so that doesn't necessarily mean TV, it could be YouTube video, YouTube pre-rolls as well, but audio visual is great in terms of brand building, in terms of building, as you said, Mark, that positioning in the mind of the customer. What do you want to be famous for with the mind of the customer? Audio visual is one of the best mediums to do that. In terms of, you know, it's not too bad at driving short-term activation as well, but we all know that, you know, digital mediums like search and display, press, they're great at driving short-term activations that can really drive a sale today or the next day. So it's really thinking about, you know, what role that advertising message is there to play. Is it there to build something in the mind of the customer, which is going to be of benefit for the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years? Or is it trying to drive a sale, you know, in the next week? Depending on that, I'd be looking at, you know, that's the key sort of the boom gate in terms of which way I'll go in terms of choosing media. But I think COVID-19 then adds another layer in terms of where are the eyeballs at the moment. And, you know, as I've said, they're at home, they're on TV, they're online, not as much in commute time in terms of radio and out of home. But there is a caveat to that. You know, as we talk in the middle of May, restrictions are going to lift sooner rather than later. It's almost like playing the stock market. If you invested at the right time, you could get some great deals in radio and out of home as we all start commuting again and really get some great value for money there. So it always does depend. So it's not categorically do this one versus this one, but it's really think about your message, really think about your audience, and really think about what customers are doing right now due to COVID-19.
So, Karl, would it be a summary to say that you got to zig when everyone else is zagging?
It depends if everyone's zagging. I wouldn't be focused on the competition. I'd be focused on the customer. Think customer first. Be customer-centric, not product-centric. Be customer-centric, not competitor-centric. Now is a time more than ever as customers are going through so much to display a level of empathy, but also really, you know, in terms of what customers have done, you know, we've gone from commuting and being out and about to just overnight being in home. So, you know, it's really keeping an eye on the customer.
Karl, you know, taking it a step further, how would you execute a PR strategy from here? what would you be doing? Because there's a lot of media out there, a lot of press guys and that. What would you be doing from your side?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's, PR in non-COVID-19 times, and then there's PR in COVID-19 times. So trying to get any form of public relations that isn't COVID-19, you have to be fighting really, really hard and have a great, a really interesting angle at the moment. All you have to do is switch on the TV and watch the nightly news or open a newspaper. And predominantly, we're all interested in wanting to know about COVID-19 related issues. So in terms of, I can't give you specifics, but I can give you the principles of what's actually resonating from the media and who is getting good media coverage at the moment. Either fortunately or unfortunately, it's anyone with a great news story or anyone with a diabolical story. So just because you're in a bad news, car manufacturers and auto dealers might be in the bad news story at the moment in terms of, sales are down, but where can you think of where the good news are? Where are those green shoots? I'll give you some examples from just reading the newspaper over the weekend as indicative of the type of news coverage that's getting played. So there was an article about pubs being closed. And the idea that, they're really struggling. And, they were sort of talking about certain pubs in Melbourne. Now, if you follow the philosophy that any PR is good PR, again, when pubs do open, the people who read that went, oh, yeah, I love that pub. As soon as they reopen, I'm going to go back there. It's maintaining that top of mind relevance. So even in that negative story, there is some positivity in terms of building saliency, building top of mind awareness with the customer. On the flip side, if you've got a good news story, and this was, again, being really customer-centric, there was an online tracksuit provider that was a couple of mums startup. They actually said business was booming. Business was up 300%. And, of course, journalists are looking to see what customers are doing while we're in lockdown. So I do have actual pants on during this conversation, and they're not tracksuit pants. So I did get dressed up. But a lot of people on Zoom calls, with tracksuit bottoms on below. So therefore, a really good news story that the journalists were covering is that sales were booming in particular categories, in particular areas. So I think about thinking about, what are the things that, in terms of what's happening where you can build top of mind awareness around COVID-19 in terms of both positive and negative stories, and thinking about how you could frame that. But also going back to that topic we talked about, innovative acts, not just ads. For example, if you had the first mover advantage I haven't seen it widely reported about that issue around battery maintenance and battery service. If you were saying how you're redeploying team and staff to go out and do battery checks, that could be something that the local media or the state-based media would want to cover, because it's COVID-19 related, talking about how businesses are pivoting and adapting. So I think about, how can I reframe some of those negative situations to, again, be top of mind? How, if they've got any good news stories, for example, a certain type of car is selling more, or there's a lot of interest actually online, there's new initiatives happening that I could actually then generate some positive PR coverage about. So I just think, sitting on your laurels and expecting, a new car release to get some PR at this point of time, that's trying to do the same thing over and again and expecting a different result, which isn't just going to cut it at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I saw a brand, and what they were doing is they were providing vehicles free of charge to young students to go and deliver meals and buy groceries for elderly people.
I think that is a fantastic example, John, because it's an example of pivoting. It's an example of acts, not ads. It's another example of, utilizing your existing assets, your existing capital, and how can you redeploy it that's really in a very customer-centric way. So I like to think about the principles and then leave it up to the experts, the people on the ground, the people understanding what the local communities are feeling, to then execute the tactics. So I think those principles of, utilizing your existing capital, pivoting from your existing plan, and acts, not ads, they're the three things to keep in mind, and think about how you can adapt it to your particular brand or your particular geography.
But I think even coming back to, just empowering your staff to think up these ideas and get going and do it, because sometimes you as dealer principal think you need to do everything, but if you get your sales guys say, okay, if you think about this, what can we do? Or your service guys, they could come up with some interesting things because they're right there at the coalface.
John, can I tell you an interesting story about that? I think it's a great point. And I'm going to give you an interesting story in the supermarket world. So no doubt you and your listeners have heard about the community hours that Woolworths started in Australia and then Coles copied. That actually started with a UK supermarket. I looked this up on the 12th of March when some of the panic buying was starting, a UK supermarket and a local branch of a brand called Iceland. And it was the local team members that actually took that on and went, wow, some of our elderly customers are not being looked after here. They went to senior managers and said, can we do this? And they implemented in that one store. The brand then took that out nationally. Then a lot of other UK retailers then took it out and they copied it. And then it came to Australia and Woolworths did it and then Coles did it. I actually saw some data that said Coles and Woolworths are some of the brands that customers in Australia have responded the best and in the most customer-centric way to the COVID-19 response. And it was largely due to that community hour. Picking back up on your story, John, and hopefully, or your point, John, and hopefully my story is reiterated, is where if you can empower a team and and thinking about what your brand stands for and thinking about how they can do acts, not ads, and pivot in this face of COVID-19, it can actually have great impact, not only right now in terms of trying to drive some revenue, but also for the long term.
So, Karl, question for you, getting back to the marketing side of things, as far as the communication channels and game plan. What we see the tonality, a lot of the ads, and you mentioned it before, in these unprecedented times, and it's this very doom and gloom type messaging, and it could be any brand or any product in any industry or any service. I'm keen to get your take as to what is a winning strategy here? What would be your game plan for a dealer or car manufacturer right now from a tonality, storytelling, and what message do you want to get out there, or would you recommend that they get out there?
Yeah, okay. I think it's a great question because, again, looking to the past and during the recessions of the 90s and the GFC, the tonality that actually a lot of brands went with was that of, quite austere, quite serious, because the mood of the country was in that, so anything frivolous was kind of frowned upon. Recent data, even as recent as last week, has looked at what's working and what's not. So as I said, I'm a great student of marketing. I've been looking at what's really resonating. And there are two key things that are really resonating. The idea of providing that usefulness, that level of empathy, and I won't say, being sad and somber, but a level of empathy. And usually that's through the acts and ads component, but, communicating an act where you're demonstrating some usefulness to the customer. But surprisingly, it's this idea of light relief, entertainment, looking at what is actually working in terms of on Netflix. Comedy consumption is significantly up versus same time year on year. We're all in this mode of we're seeking out light relief. We're seeking out comedy. I wouldn't say from an advertising point of view, I'd go down the humor route, but I think anything that gives a smile, anything gives some form of entertainment. And if I can, use a couple of examples that, we've just gone through Mother's Day, and that idea of connectedness actually really resonated more so than any other time because we actually are socially isolated. We actually can't see, our family at the moment. So that idea of connectedness, the idea of, nostalgia. I heard some brand marketers talking about, we can't show crowds at the moment because no one can get together. That's hooey. Customers are smart enough to know that, we're living in a period of restrictions, but we're not going to be like that forever, ever. So anything that shows, community, anything that shows connectedness, anything that sort of refers back to the past, anything that gives light relief, anything that gives entertainment is actually really, really resonating. Anything that's not, the things that are not is that sad and somber tone. Customers are just walking away from it because like my life is full of that at the moment. I want to get away from that. And again, if I like to give some examples that, in terms of entertainment, but they're potentially relevant from a automotive industry. I mean, I found myself, looking for entertainment and I saw that Porsche had just released some, the head office brand had released some video footage from their Le Mans, as being a great motorsport enthusiast from Le Mans, and around the documentary around that. And I gobbled that up because, I'm looking for entertainment because I can't watch my Formula One at the moment. And I thought that was fantastic. Now, am I going to go out and buy a Porsche tomorrow? Well, I'd like to, but I can't. But in terms of, building top of mind awareness around Porsche as a performance vehicle, did that do something to me in 5 years' time? Absolutely. That really resonated. I think another area that's resonating, and I never thought I'd be doing this myself, and I think a lot of people have been in the same way in terms of looking for that entertainment, is around esports. The Formula One groups and also V8s, or the supercars, as they're called now, are actually got into esports. So again, looking for that entertainment, looking for that light relief, is a great way to how you position your brand around that. I know large manufacturers can maybe position themselves around esports, but for example, could dealers position themselves around local esport competitions and things like that? So the summary to your question, Mark, is I'd stick away from somber, unprecedented times type communication. I'd look at how I can be useful, and communicating those acts, not ads, but also looking at how I can provide some light relief or entertainment or a level of a smile and connectedness through my marketing messages.
Thanks, Karl. Interesting you say about the comedy consumption. I noticed Netflix, there's a new Seinfeld episode or 1 hour special, 23 Hours to Kill. Highly recommended. I've watched it twice, and it's really good value. So for those Seinfeld fans out there.
Well, I'll recommend Drive to Survive on Formula One. I'll watch that over and over again, and I'll recommend also some of the great content that some of the automotive brands are actually putting around about motorsport, and some of the behind the scenes stuff that I think as a motorsport enthusiast is fantastic.
So, Karl, keeping it simple, what are the three key takeaways for a successful local area marketing plan that you would recommend for a dealer?
I think I started off by saying don't go dark. So the first one is invest. Don't go dark. Don't let your marketing flame go out. Think about how you can continue to have a presence, demonstrating, either brand building or a level of usefulness based on, those acts, not ads. So that would then be the second point in terms of how you pivot and utilize around, your marketing investment around paid, owned, and earned. Don't just think about an owned campaign about what you're doing on your website. Think about how you can leverage it in earned, how you're seeding that through social media. Or if you do a piece of paid investment, how you're leveraging that on your website or your store frontage, or therefore through your earned media, your social media. And I think the third point is being really customer centric, understanding, customer centricity, both from a media consumption point of view, so go where the eyeballs are, but also what the community are feeling and thinking. So, as we move out of lockdown, that could be an example where cars do need servicing or need battery replacement, or, as we went into lockdown, thinking about, hey, our dealership, navigated its way so you come in and be safe, and have contactless, car purchasing or something along those lines. But even thinking about the third phase, if we've gone through these unprecedented times, then we've gone into the new normal, and then the third phase should be recovery or green shoots, about how you can actually be really customer centric and tapping into the customer psyche as we move through that phase as well.
No, I think from our side, it's quite inspiring because, we're sitting in quite a suppressed state at the moment. And I think you've pointed out a whole lot of opportunities that dealers and car manufacturers can aim at and go for. And I think once you get a target and you've got a direction to take, that really helps to a huge extent, because otherwise you can get quite depressed and sort of go into your own hole, so.
It's interesting, the information you've just covered there, Karl. I'm a massive fan of Franklin Covey and Stephen Covey's books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And habit 1 is proactive language. And the second one is empathy responses. Empathetic responses. So that those two elements in a marketing messaging strategy really make sense and resonate because they're proven to work. And it is interesting to see that so many brands have gone down the doom and gloom road. I've actually got some information this morning just on two sources of business that are significantly up. One was definitely that battery issue, because batteries, if you're not driving a car, the batteries drain and go flat, especially coming into winter. And your battery check's a fantastic one. It's a very good idea and a good service that can be provided. But also the mobile tyre shop had their best month on record, because it's a new business that brings tyres to people. And tyres are a grudge buy, but it's contactless. You have to move your vehicle. You're at home, and these businesses are actually doing exceptionally well. So this is an opportunity for any service provider to really bring the car to the people. And I notice also car sales have got a really good initiative flagged for dealers with their listings, and where they will actually take the car to the customer, and it shows a little badge on the listing that they offer that as a service on that vehicle. And it actually outlines what does that mean. It's not just a badge with nothing else on it. You then click on it and it details that there's a COVID policy. This is what they're going to do. These are the things they're going to talk to you about. And this is why it's the problems they're solving for you.
I think it's a great example of, what, as I said, it's an overused term, but pivoting and thinking about how you can actually continue to be relevant. I like the fact that you brought in Covey. One of the things I live by, and in terms of proactiveness, is around this concept of a beautiful constraint. Now, we're living with a lot of constraints at the moment from a business point of view, but it's about framing. And I like to think about how you can reframe constraints as something beautiful, because that's where innovation actually occurs. So if I can explain this concept of a beautiful constraint, which might serve as some inspiration, and I think you gave some great examples there, Mark. A beautiful constraint is where you have a bold ambition, but then you've got a constraint actually holding you back. And I'll use a small example again from Le Mans. Audi, when they were trying to win Le Mans, knew that they had a heavier car and it's not a powerful engine as some of the Porsche GT competitors. That was their constraint. Their bold ambition was to win Le Mans. So what they decided to do was make a more fuel efficient engine. So therefore, I think they had 7 pit stops versus the 8 pit stops, and they ended up winning. So it's an example of, having a beautiful constraint can actually lead to innovation. And I think we're living in a time of constraints, but how can you turn those constraints into something beautiful? Think about that bold ambition and think about that constraint. And I think John made the point before about, team members being actively involved in terms of, idea creation around innovation that can continue to be useful, but also build brand at this time to bode well for as we bounce out of COVID-19 to improve sales over year 1, 2, year and 3 after.
It's interesting, Karl, you raised a really good point. I think it's a fantastic one. It sort of takes me back to the recession that we had to have in the early 90s. And I'm just wondering how many dealers are actually doing this. You mentioned this is an opportunity to train staff, whereas what we're seeing is staff are being laid off, or they're being idled, only working 1 or 2 days a week. What's happening in the other times is they're just doing nothing. I think back to when I was back running in my service days, running a workshop in a dealership in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. And you'd either send technicians home or you'd get them making drain trays, and you'd be doing all sorts of innovative things just so they're busy. And I liken it to cricketers, where when it's a dot ball, they throw the ball to as many players as possible so they're catching it and handling it, not rubbing sandpaper on it, hopefully not. But you know what I mean? They're touching it. So when the ball is a fly ball coming their way, they're going to catch it. They're not going to be out of tune with it. And I think that's a critical point.
Yeah, I think it's funny that, if you're on your own social media channels at the moment, or you're reading the newspaper, everyone's like, they're using the time to learn a new language or learn a musical instrument. Well, what about businesses? You've been, we're really going through a tough time at the moment. And from a cash flow point of view, but there is, I just reframe it. I guess an example of how can you turn a constraint into a beautiful constraint? The ambition was to have the most professional team, or the most well-trained service team, or the best performing website, or the website with the most amount of content, or website that, you know, that had the most amount of videos. Well, you've been given this luxury of time of being able to invest resource into that to be able to do that. So, you know, it's a great time to train up the team, or look at your website, or look at your retail frontage, or do some of those renovations and things like that you're wanting to, be it in your digital landscape or your physical landscape. So think about how you can actually redeploy team where you're actually generating, you know, I guess, an investment that actually bodes you well for the next 1, 2, 3, and 5 years and beyond. Even HR manuals.
Sure.
It's definitely a good time to rewrite procedure manuals, right?
Yeah,
Carl?
procedure manuals as well.
We've all been in that situation where, yes, we need to put that procedure together. It's like, yeah, we'll get around to it. We know what we're doing. We're getting stuff done. We've got to get the monthly result, the weekly result, the daily result. And it is that challenge of getting the vision up on the horizon, not just looking at the end of the bonnet as we drive down the road. It's getting that vision up, because when the vision's further, the stuff close to you isn't as scary. It's when everything's coming at you really quickly. Your vision's very short. It can be a very stressful environment to be in. So yeah, the key is get that vision out.
I want to talk about my experience from working in e-commerce retail for near on 12 years, and this idea of digital experiences and physical experiences. My encouragement to dealer principals and their teams is, don't think like that. Don't think about digital experiences, and don't think about physical experiences. Don't think about digital marketing and non-digital marketing. Think about experiences and think about marketing, because the line between digital and physical and what's called digital and traditional marketing, there is no line. It is all one. You know, I'll give you the lesson we had from when I was in Officeworks as the GM of marketing there, overseeing e-commerce, in that, you know, if a customer came in and they researched something online and then they bought it in store, we would say, was that an e-commerce sale or an in-store sale? Well, neither. It's both. If a customer was in our store and then was buying something that wasn't available in store, but it was purchased online through the store point of sale and delivered to their home, was that a physical sale because they were in the store, or was it a digital sale because it was through the e-commerce site? Well, it was both. It didn't matter. It was a sale. Customers come in to shop. They don't come in to buy online or buy in store. They come in to shop. And again, I think about in terms of, do they come, you know, in terms of car sales, you know, are they fact finding in store? Are they fact finding online? Well, both. Their experiences will go through each of the other. So the one thing I would encourage you to think about, in going back to that idea of customer centricity, is your audience thinks about the customer journey and how they intersect between the line between physical and digital. If I'm in store, if I'm in a dealership and I'm looking at the website online, you know, again, is that a physical or digital experience? Well, it doesn't matter. It's an experience. And I think we've got an opportunity now to think about how our physical experiences interact with our digital experiences, and our digital experiences interact with our physical. One little mantra we used to say, and I like to say, is that bring the best of physical to digital and bring the best of digital to physical. If you've got great customer experience and service in your dealerships, how do you bring some of that expertise online? That could be through chatbots. It could be through videos. It could be through frequently asked questions. So, and similarly, you've got great content online, be it video content or interactive tools. How do you bring some of those experiences that are online into the store? Well, at the end of the day, we've all got these things called mobile phones. You don't need to invest in big lots of tech to actually bring great digital experiences into the dealerships. You can get customers using their own mobile phones to do some form of level of interactivity or research, and actually encourage them to go on their phone. So one thing that I'd really encourage any marketer or any owner of a business that has both a bricks and mortar presence and a digital experience is, don't delineate between the two. Think about how you bring the best of physical to digital and the best of digital to physical.
That lines up well with the adage, be bold when others are fearful, and then be fearful when others are bold.
Yeah. There's some good sayings. You talk about being bold. I recently did an MBA course in brand management. And I remember so Mark's a dear friend of mine, and I had a coffee with him just as I was about to undertake the online exam, which was actually to be a brand manager of this fake brand in this fake world, where you had to make certain decisions, and then each time you made those decisions, you'd hit the run button, and then a year would transpire in 30 seconds, and your mark was then the share price after 5 years. And I knew in my heart of hearts that I needed to be bold and make some bold decisions and be clear about what customers I was targeting, be clear about the level of R&D, be clear about the level of investment I wanted to make, be clear about my pricing strategy, and, not sort of be mediocre in any way, shape or form. And talking to Mark really reminded me, that, the best decision or the worst decision you can make is not making a decision. The best decision is to make a decision and hold the line and be bold. And I'm not sure if I ever told you, Mark, but I ended up with a score that was the top 10 of the class out of an international cohort of students of 400. So thank you for that copy that we had, and that little reminder to always be bold in decision making and in strategy, because again, the worst decision you can make is not make a decision.
Well, that's great news, Karl, and congratulations on achieving that great result. But well done.
Well, as a marketing, I think you called me a marketing guru. If I couldn't get a top score at an MBA marketing course, I'd be worried.
Congratulations.
Yeah, Karl, thanks very much for a very inspiring talk today. I think Mark and I really enjoyed it, and I think if we're not bold after this, you really inspired us to be bold and make decisions. So thanks very much. We really appreciate that. So.
Yeah, be bold, try things, experiment, fail fast, and then get on with it. But don't let your marketing flame go out.
Okay, Mark, I think we had a really excellent guest today. Karl came across with some fantastic ideas. What would be the 2 or 3 things that you'd like to wrap up, and what dealers should be doing out of that conversation?
I agree, John. This was a fantastic podcast with Karl. He is a marketing guru, really knows his stuff, and I really like the be bold when others are fearful and fearful when others are bold. That's a theme that consistently comes through with all the discussions that we've been having, and I dare say that we will have. But the 3 big ones that I took from Karl, and the really big surprise ones, don't go dark because the fire goes out and it's hard to get the fire started again. The second one, so therefore advertise, do something. Now, the key is do something, and this is where he's pivoting. The second one for me is the pivoting on the earned assets, the paid assets, and the ones that you've actually in your share. And the third one is tap into that local community and just be genuine about the customer. So they're the 3 lines. Pivoting with your assets, don't go dark, and really can keep that messaging in a positive tonality and not this negativity of doom and gloom.
Yeah, I think that was really key to me too. It really inspired me to be positive about even some difficult times. You have to still be positive, so that was really interesting. I think I'd just like to thank the listeners. Thanks very much for listening to us today. We enjoyed our discussion. If you liked what you heard, please follow us, and we look forward to talking to you next week. If you have any ideas or recommendations of what we can do to improve, we'd love to hear it, so please share those with us. Thanks very much.